This is OwlUp, where learning happens in minutes, not hours. For a deeper journey, explore all our courses at owlup.co. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Chapter 3 of our series, Lost Civilizations, the Great Societies Before Rome. In this episode titled Ancient Egypt, 3,000 Years of Stability, we'll explore the incredible factors that contributed to Egypt's remarkable endurance as a civilization. So, get comfy and let's dive in. For nearly 3,000 years, Egypt did something almost no other civilization managed. It stayed itself. Dynasties rose, wars flared, rivals collapsed, yet Egypt's temples, language, and pharaohs kept marching to the same steady rhythm. How does a culture pull that off? Stability on that scale wasn't an accident. It was engineered, generation after generation. Egypt's secret wasn't just surviving crises, but turning routine into power. Start with the Nile's rhythm. Farmers watched its slow rise and fall the way a doctor tracks a patient's pulse. Small deviations mattered, but the pattern held. Scribes logged water levels, tax officials adjusted grain quotas, and temples timed festivals to this cycle. Layered on top was a political system that treated the pharaoh not merely as a ruler, but as the living hinge between gods and people. Around him stretched an administrative web of scribes, storehouses, and local governors that could be tightened or loosened as times demanded. Rather than chasing constant reform, Egypt refined what already worked, using careful record-keeping, enduring religious narratives, and long-term planning to turn predictability into a civilizational habit. That long arc wasn't smooth. It lurched through droughts, invasions, and palace coups. Yet, instead of snapping, Egypt bent and re-straightened. Foreign rulers like the Hyksos, Libyans, Nubians, and Persians took the throne at different times, but they often adopted Egyptian titles, gods, and court rituals rather than erase them. Local elites, priests, governors, and scribal families acted like hidden scaffolding, keeping daily life recognizable even when crowns changed. Art, too, served as a quiet stabilizer. Workshop manuals, grid systems, and strict proportions trained generations of craftsmen to reproduce a shared visual language, so tombs and temples kept looking Egyptian, even as power shifted. Look closely at how Egypt handled three basic facts of life: food, work, and death, and the mechanics of its long run start to come into focus. Begin with food. The Nile's flood set the agricultural calendar, but what Egyptians did with the harvest mattered just as much. By the Old Kingdom, they were storing surplus grain in massive state granaries, essentially a distributed safety net. Scribes tracked deliveries in hieratic script, a faster, cursive offshoot of hieroglyphs used for everything from field accounts to legal contracts. When droughts or low floods hit, these reserves could be redirected, keeping both cities and temple estates supplied. The system wasn't flawless, famines happened, but the habit of moving surplus from field to state to people became embedded practice, not emergency improvisation. Work was organized with similar foresight. Those pyramids and temples were built less by chains of slaves than by rotating teams of farmers fulfilling labor tax in the off-season. Excavations at workers' villages near Giza show planned streets, bakeries, breweries, and medical care, plus cattle bones from decent quality meat. Names and graffiti in the Great Pyramid, the drunkards of Menkaure, for example, read more like proud crew tags than marks of misery. Construction sites doubled as training grounds. A peasant's son could learn skilled stone cutting or join the scribal ladder, slowly feeding fresh talent into the bureaucracy and priesthood. Death, paradoxically, was where Egypt invested some of its most future-oriented thinking. Tombs were designed as eternal houses. By choosing specific spells, scenes, and grave goods, elites tried to script their memory for centuries. Funerary texts evolved from Old Kingdom pyramid texts restricted to kings, to coffin texts for nobles, and later the more democratized Book of the Dead on papyrus. Each stage added new spells and visual formulas, but rarely discarded the old ones, layering tradition like sediment. Ordinary people participated at a smaller scale, commissioning simple stelae or amulets that plugged them into the same cosmic order as the pharaoh. Behind all this ran a quiet technological and intellectual arms race. Mathematics for surveying fields sharpened into tools for pyramid angles and temple alignment. Medical papyri compiled case histories and treatments, distinguishing between an illness I can treat and an illness I cannot treat. Writing itself ballooned from hundreds to thousands of signs, spawning specialist schools that guarded and transmitted increasingly complex knowledge. The result wasn't a frozen civilization, but one that preferred to upgrade its core systems rather than replace them. Walk through a single Egyptian town in, say, 1500 BCE, and you can see this upgrade-don't-replace habit at street level. A farmer might inherit a strip of field measured in rope lengths his grandfather recognized, yet the survey team now uses refined geometry to reset its boundaries after each flood. In the workshop quarter, a stonecutter's grandson still carves familiar gods, but with tools tempered in better copper alloys and guided by more precise grids on plastered walls. In the local temple, hymns follow ancient patterns while new festival processions are added, weaving recent victories and donors into venerable chants without discarding a single older line. Here's where the pattern sharpens. Instead of overturning what came before, Egyptians nested innovations inside old frameworks. Legal contracts expanded in complexity but kept traditional openings. New deities like Amun rose to prominence by absorbing older forms and epithets. Even village shrines accumulated layers, fresh paint, additional chapels, new donation lists, until a modest sanctuary quietly preserved centuries of revisions in a single, living space. 3 millennia of near-continuous institutions act like a time-lapse of how systems age. Egypt shows that durable societies don't just endure change, they absorb it in layers, like glaze on a repeatedly fired pot. For us, that hints at a future where climate tech, water law, and digital archives accumulate rather than reset each generation. Your city's zoning code or data servers may be the next temple walls, silently carrying forward choices no one now alive remembers making. In the end, Egypt's long run hints at a different way to think about endings. When Greek and Roman rulers arrived, village shrines still burned incense, scribes still copied old hymns, and farmers still watched canal levels like cooks eyeing a simmering pot. Civilizations may change names on the door, yet their deepest habits often keep quietly working underneath. Try this experiment. For 1 week, run your day like a mini, ancient Egyptian kingdom. Pick a simple ritual to repeat at the same time every day, like a sunrise walk or a 10-minute evening review, and treat it like the daily temple rites that kept Ma'at, cosmic order, in balance. Choose one pyramid project, a single long-term goal, and, instead of trying to finish it fast, add just one clearly defined stone to it every day. For example, 1 page written, 1 drawing finished, 1 language lesson completed. At the end of the week, notice how this mix of stable ritual plus tiny, consistent building blocks affects your stress level, focus, and sense of long-term progress. This was OwlUp, your daily step forward. This series continues with more chapters on OwlUp.co. Visit OwlUp.co to access the complete course and continue your learning journey. See you there!